Well, folks, thanks for tuning in again. Today, you can see I've got a very interesting office background here, not my regular studio. Thanks for tuning in. I'm buried deep in the mountains of Alberta right now and reflecting on that and trying to get a view of the rest of the universe while I'm here. Thanks for tuning in. We're looking at this is kind of like a D-Day, as you know, for Iran, as President Trump has said. They're going to really start, he's calling it Bridge Day. They're going to start taking out bridges, start to take out refineries, because the Ayatollah regime, the Islamist extremists, are simply not willing to shut things down in terms of their war efforts. The U.S. has offered even to give Iran, the leadership there, allow them access to uranium and nuclear supplies for medical reasons and other kinds of development. The regime there just keeps killing their own people and striking out, even though they've virtually been destroyed everywhere. So we're going to see what's happening. The Iranian regime is also going to be forcing their citizens to go and stand around or near some of these facilities that they think will be bombed. It's going to get very interesting, folks. We'll see kind of what develops on that front. And as we look at the markets, as people are sort of leaning forward on their chairs, watching what's going to happen in Iran today, we see interesting on the Canadian markets. It's called the TSX, or if you remember from last week, we talked about the difference between some of the market measurements, Standard & Poor's, and other measurements that are used in the U.S. Well, the Toronto Stock Exchange has surged upwards. Actually, it's its best position in about a month, and so people are feeling kind of optimistic that the war might actually be coming to an end. You see now, on terms of oil prices, also just something that may be confusing to people. Sometimes you hear when you talk about, they tell you about the price of oil, because that's usually a measure of how the various economies are doing and how much demand in the economy. You hear terms like WTI, Brent. Sometimes you hear about Canadian oil base, but WTI and Brent, WTI, that just stands for West Texas Intermediate. That's an average price that's taken from oil and gas products that are produced basically in Texas. And the demand for that reflects what the price is going to be for the day and what the trend is. When they talk about Brent, that's oil and oil products that are coming from the UK and Norway. Principally, that's being drawn out of the North Sea, the huge undersea developments there. Because WTI it's called a sweet crude, it doesn't take as much processing to make it into gasoline. It's readily available, so it will tend to, because the costs are down a bit in terms of production, usually tends to price below Brent. Brent is coming out of the North Sea. It's a little heavier oil. It's harder to get at, but of course it's millions of barrels being produced a day, and so that tends to be a little higher. So that explains the relationship. Just keep that in mind. WTI, that's the U.S. price. Brent is Norway and UK. Canadian oil, Canadian product is usually more expensive because it largely comes from Alberta and comes from oil sands there, and it comes out in a very clean way, but it is a heavier oil, so it costs a little more. So the demand for that coming out of there is a little different and doesn't tie always to WTI and Brent. Those are usually the two main markers that you see. And very interesting also to see that high mark in the Canadian market today, Canadian stock markets being quite high. Well, Mr. Mamdani, the mayor of New York, continues to make headlines with his radical new policies. This is going to be a real measurement and a real proving ground over a period. What I'm encouraging people to do is watch the economy in New York over the next 2 to 3 years. My prediction are things are going to get worse economically because Mayor Mamdani is a very significant hardline leftist socialist, and those policies, as we talk about on this show a lot, always lead to higher rates of poverty, higher rates of taxation, and people will try and leave. People who are working hard, people who want to make a living will leave. Now he said all of their policies are going to be based on a racial equity plan. And so what he's done, he's targeted people who are low income, and he's talking about that's race-based, and he's talking about health. He says people on the health side, it's race-based also. What he doesn't take into account, and even President Obama used to talk about this, when you're looking at low-income families, and this goes across racial lines, doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, what I'm going to say was going to, it'll upset people, and other people are going to say, well, we knew that. But if you remember President Obama, he said the biggest problem they have in the black community is fatherless homes, and where fathers are not taking up their responsibility. That will tend, doesn't matter if it's black, white, doesn't matter the racial, those homes will tend to be, despite the hardworking efforts of a single parent, be it male or female, it's one person doing a job that's really best done by two, or better done by two. And so Mamdani really needs to be looking at not the black, white, Asian / factor, needs to be looking at where do moms need the most support, what kind of job training do people need, but strictly basing payments, strictly based on skin color, in fact, goes against everything Martin Luther King talked about. He said we shouldn't be looking at the color of our skin. And then on the health, he's talking about race-based health, that people who are black have poorer health, and that's all a result of discrimination. Again, take the color out of it. Do a colorblind analysis of health outcomes, and you will see, and people really get upset when you talk about this, but it's simply a matter, you will see with obesity, which leads to all kinds of problems, and diabetes being maybe the least of those. It doesn't matter what color, obesity is a factor. If you've got programs that are helping people and dealing with obesity factors, you're going to have better health outcomes. Color has nothing to do with it. Make it colorblind and look at these areas and deal with them, and you're going to have better outcomes. Well, in Canada, there's a report out today blaming the Canadian military for violating rules while government was placing their severe COVID-19 restrictions in place. And it was I don't know if we should be blaming the military for this, talking about military in airports, and military stopping people, making sure they had their health cards or that they were wearing their mask properly. You know what? The military was just acting on orders from the federal government, from the federal Liberals, and court case after court case is now saying the federal Liberals went way too far. They shouldn't have brought in the Emergencies Act. They were ignoring some of the real health outcomes. So interesting to see media trying to blame the military for following rules during the COVID-19, when clearly the courts, every case almost that's coming before the courts, is saying the government was too heavy-handed in terms of what they were doing. I want to take a little snapshot today of something that I observed certainly when I was Minister of Public Safety and responsible for corrections and for the prisons. And this is, there's a growing concerns and more reports coming out that the threat of prison, first of all, is not having a deterring effect as much as we would like to see. Now take a snapshot of the news today. There's a story out of Nova Scotia talking about the drug trade in our prisons, talking about Robert John McLaughlin. He's 42 years old, and he's a guard. He's just been being charged related to the dealing of drugs in the prisons. And with the research that's been going on here, and with the analysis of this particular case, we see that it's widespread within the prison system. Prisoners get somewhat easy access to drugs. They have communal visits and conjugal visits, and by the way, they should have some degree of visits from family and loved ones, but a lot of things going on in the prisons that make it not that, now people are going to get upset at this, but in the minds of some people, not that bad a place to see or a place to be. And one of the things that is missing from prisons is a work component. Some prisons try to have a bit of a program there, some with success, but it's not widespread and it's not demanding enough. We see this lack of fear of going to prison. Just today, you'll see the story, 2 people dead from a shooting in a Brampton schoolyard. Now, it was after school hours. but an adult and a young person dead. Again, you see that there's no fear. Young people packing illegal weapons, and these are not the weapons, unfortunately, that are being targeted by the failed Liberal gun program. The Liberals continuing to go after hunters and sport shooters, and no real threat of serious jail time for those who are smuggling guns in, for those who are using guns. It's this lack of fear. Now, I'm going to shift to a radical case that's just being talked about in the news today that goes along the same lines. This is not just a Canadian problem, this is a U.S. problem, and it's a chilling story about a woman. I'm not even going to say her name because I don't like highlighting brutal killers like this, but this woman admits very clearly that she planned the killing of her father. This woman is in her 20s. She planned it for weeks. She wrote about it. She took notes on it. And when he walked in the door coming home from a business trip, she shot him in cold blood a number of times. And in the court case as a felony, she was sentenced. And in the court case, she said, I'm not afraid anymore. She said, I am totally guilty. I planned this thing. I wanted to kill him. I hated him. And she didn't suggest there was any, childhood sexual abuse or anything like that. And she said she was looking forward to prison, looking forward to going there and living in a place where I guess she'll feel accepted. So the deterring effect of prison is something that governments everywhere need to be taking a closer look. Does that mean prisons should be harsh, nasty places and we treat people meanly? No, there's all kinds of human rights that have to be respected relative to our prisons. But if you take out the work component, and I have visited many of our prisons, I was moved to another portfolio to take on other issues before we had a chance to really establish things deeply. You need two things that are needed, the two things that seem to have an effect: a significant work-based program where people are actually in prison having to work at something meaningful, 8 hours a day, give them pay for it, help them use that pay to pay off if they're in for a financial crime. That has to be a component, and a faith-based component are the only two things that we see in prison systems, not just in Canada and the US, but around the world. The more you back off of those type of programs, the more you're going to have people not fearing prison, the more you're going to have these serious crime effects. Well, we're about a week away now from the by-elections that are coming up in Canada, which could determine whether the federal Liberals, get a majority without having to go to a full election. There's 3 by-elections coming up. They're heavily favored in at least 2 of those, probably in 3. And get this, something to watch for. There's rumors about maybe more MPs crossing the floor. We don't know if that's going to materialize. So the big question is going to be, what is the Prime Minister going to do? If he gets his majority, it'll be slim, but it will be a majority. And of course, the Liberals are always worried about the NDP gaining ground, as they might with their new leader, Avi Lewis. Going to be a very interesting time. We'll see what happens. So keep an eye on this on the week ahead. Well, the Senate itself, there are some empty seats in the Senate, some appointments that are needed. Justin Trudeau said he made the Senate nonpartisan. He took away, allowed people to call themselves independent senators. Everybody knows that that's a joke. The Senate is heavily liberally appointed. They can call themselves independent, but they lean significantly to the liberal side of political bias. And there's a number of seats empty right now. It's going to be interesting. People will be watching to see who Prime Minister Carney will be doing, appointing to the Senate. Now, I want to make a prediction. There will be at least one, maybe more. There will be at least one Senate appointment coming from media. And people kind of smile sometimes when I talk about this, but it's very clear to me, being the numbers of years on the Hill, the people that make it, to get appointed to the Senate from media, when you look at their past track record, they're the ones who are much more, they're supposed to be neutral, but they're much more favorable of the Liberal government. And I want you there's a gentleman by the name of Robert Fife. He's a senior reporter. He was on CTV News. I want you to take a look at that today. I won't play it here. And look, I like Robert Fife. He's a nice guy. He's always been soft on the Liberals. And today, now that there's Senate appointments looming, he's just one of the most astonishing political commentators that I've seen, in terms of so favorable to Mr. Carney, to the federal Liberals, so down on Pierre Poilievre. Now look, Reporters have to flip back and forth, and they should be neutral and comment the positives and negatives on both sides. But you want to see this one. I'm making a prediction that Robert Fife indeed may well be appointed to the Senate. Much of his career has been a little bit on the soft side toward the Liberal side, coming out very, very strong more recently, talking glowingly about the Liberals and Prime Minister Carney. So take a look. Senate appointments coming up. There'll be at least one from media, maybe more. Watch for Robert Fife. He may make it there. Well, talking about optimism, just incredible the reports that keep coming out about the 2 pilots that were rescued on that mission in Iran. And the reports coming out on the one, as you recall, you've seen it in the news, one of the pilots was rescued fairly quickly. The other has survived, just unbelievable. He was badly injured. He was bleeding. He survived. He climbed up to 7,000 feet because they know they have to get in a place where they can't be seen, but also their emergency beacon has to work if they're going to be saved. And here's this guy, he's probably bleeding to death. He's got no food, trying to find a little bit of water, climbing 7,000 feet up. And his main comment that is being broadcast is what he said at least one point during the operation is recorded. He said, "God is good." Now, I don't know, when I'm having a rough day and maybe I've stubbed my toe, or maybe I've got a cold, or maybe I'm just not feeling great, God is good is not usually at the top of my explanations. Amazing statement and declaration of faith coming from this guy. And the other reporters were watching this phenomenal moon mission with a Canadian on board coming back. It's about a 3-day trip back, and they said they noticed something on the other side of the moon they hadn't seen before, a slight green hue in one area. The moon is supposed to be all dreary and dark, and something, they don't know if it's vegetation, what it is, might just be a reflection, but folks, it may all not be bad. There is some color out there, folks. Stay on the positive side. Think about these folks and what's happening. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.